When we think about dangerous jobs, what comes to mind are firefighters and police officers. But I'll tell you about other unexpectedly dangerous professions out there. These people do the work not many are willing to take the risk for, so this is a shout out for them. The first profession truly deserves a reward for selflessness. These people are sewage divers, and it's a very important but also dangerous job. Towns and cities have extremely complicated sewage systems, and even a little blockage can cause all waste to flow back into the streets and homes. So, sewage systems are very closely monitored, and sewage divers are the very people who are responsible for dealing with blockages as fast as possible to prevent disastrous consequences. Sewage divers wear a dry suit and special boots. They have to stay in the water full of all kinds of waste, bacteria, and other nasty stuff. A sewage diver gets to the blockage and removes it. Since the water is contaminated, any cut, even the smallest one, can cause an infection. So these specialists must be very careful. This job can be so tremendously dangerous that it's even banned in many countries. A storm chaser is a very cool name for a profession which is also very dangerous. These people conduct meteorological research right in the field, reporting storms, tornadoes, tsunamis, and other extreme weather conditions. They collect information on weather patterns. These patterns are later studied, which helps make better forecasts and reduce damage. These specialists take photos and videos of storms to see how they form and learn more about them. Power line workers are people who are responsible for installing and maintaining electric power lines, and it's one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. There are two factors contributing to it: heights and high voltage electricity. One of the most dangerous aspects of a line worker's job is power recovery after a storm. The next profession is a sulfur miner. Sulfur is a pale yellow, odorless chemical element. It's used in agriculture to control pests and fungus, as well as in the production of matches and fireworks. Sulfur is often used in medicine too. So, some people's job is to mine it. Sulfur is typically found in volcanic regions. That's why volcanoes are the main workplace of sulfur miners. They break off sulfur from the crater floor, crumble it into smaller pieces, collect them, and then carry the substance to a nearby town. Not only is it hard work in itself, but it's also dangerous. The fumes and gases that are produced in the process can cause respiratory and dental problems. Also, some miners are located inside active volcanoes, and a sudden eruption is another potential danger. Mining is a dangerous job overall, and I'll tell you about another kind: limestone mining. Limestone is a material that's widely used in road and building construction, so you can imagine the demand for it. By the way, even the Great Pyramids of Giza were made from this material, so people have been using it for thousands of years. Limestone mining isn't an easy job. The process creates clouds of dust, and breathing this dust in isn't healthy. Also, the dust rises in the air, which is very dangerous, considering that people use sharp tools to break limestone rocks. You probably wouldn't think so, but trash and recycling collectors are doing one of the most dangerous jobs too. One collector has shared that even if you do the same job every day for years, you can't let your guard down. They have to be especially careful when they get out of the truck and go to the trash can. There's a cable that raises the container, and a mistake can break it and cause accidents. The next dangerous job is that of an underwater welder. Dry welding or welding on the shore is usually simpler since there's no pressure and the welding process can be controlled better. That's why it's the preferable type of welding, but sometimes performing it can be too expensive. Say something that should be fixed in a ship's hull is located underwater. To perform dry welding, the ship will have to be pulled out, and it's a lot of money and trouble. So underwater welding it is. There are two types of underwater welding: dry welding and wet welding. In dry welding, they use a hyperbaric chamber which they seal around the spot that needs to be welded. The chamber gets filled with gas to get rid of all the water inside and prevent more water from pouring in. Then, the process is performed, almost as if it wasn't going on underwater. But sometimes the chamber isn't available, or the welding should be done immediately. In these instances, wet welding is performed. Pure water doesn't conduct electricity, but most kinds of water, tap water, rainwater, and of course, seawater, contain numerous minerals and impurities, and those make water a great conductor of electricity. To make this process safer, gaseous bubbles are released around an electric arc. They shield the weld and protect the diver by ensuring that electricity isn't conducted through the water. The problem with the bubbles, though, is that they obscure the welding area, so it's harder to see and perform this process. Deep sea fishing is also on the list. Not all fish swim close to the shore or in shallow waters. Tuna, swordfish, and marlin are just a few of the species that swim deep underwater. Deep sea fishing is everything 100 feet underwater and deeper. It also happens far away from the shore. Such a big distance is one of the reasons why deep sea fishing is dangerous. In case of an accident, you're too far away from any professional medical help. Also, fish that swim in the deep sea are larger, faster, and stronger. So that kind of fishing is way more dangerous than shallow fishing. The open sea is also way more unpredictable than the sea close to the shore, so that's another factor. Now, let's talk about logging. Logging workers provide raw materials for different industries. It's a very demanding and dangerous job. In the early days, people took down trees manually. These days, they use machinery, but it doesn't make their job any less dangerous. Trees still fall, and now there are also sharp chainsaws that are constantly working. Also, people are outside at all times, and they have to be alert, checking their surroundings for all possible hazards, and danger can come from anywhere. Another dangerous profession is, of course, construction workers. They have to deal with great heights, ladders, machinery, and heavy weights. So, construction workers should never let their guard down at work too. Roofers are people who install roofs and repair and maintain them. They also use such materials as metal and asphalt to make roofs waterproof. They're at risk too, since they spend their days at big heights. By the way, there are also professional roof cleaners. The roof should be taken care of every once in a while. It needs to be cleaned from moss and fungus, and there are people who will do it for you. There are also industrial alpinists. They're people who climb buildings, reaching where regular people can't reach. They take care of buildings' facades, cleaning and painting them, and even making them waterproof. They also do other kinds of required maintenance to protect buildings from gases, industrial dust, and other damaging factors. Farmers risk their lives every day too. Farming is way more than milking cows and watering plants. It also means working with heavy machinery and chemicals. Tractors are quite challenging to maneuver, and they can easily roll over. Farm equipment is also dangerous because it's often very sharp. Farmers use a lot of chemicals to protect crops and keep machinery clean. Chemicals often spread over large areas, making the air around toxic. There are even more potentially dangerous things, but let's finish it with animals. Cows and horses are big, heavy, and can act unpredictably, so it's another potential threat. No matter how much you like your job, there are some days when everything just seems to go wrong. Missed deadlines, unpleasant coworkers, and lots of boring activities. Well, I'm here to tell you it could easily be worse, and I mean it. Let's look at some of the worst jobs that people had to do throughout history. During the times of Henry VII, there were certain people whose job was to accompany the monarch to the bathroom. They also had to, have a look at whatever went on in there and make sure the majestic bottom was all clean after the, proceedings. It wasn't any kind of punishment, though. People were actually competing to get this job. Why? Because it meant that they had access to the monarch at their most vulnerable state, which meant that they could potentially discuss all sorts of subjects and even influence certain decisions. Speaking of boring jobs, being a nomenclator back in the day was probably the most tedious of them all. It wasn't dangerous in any way. It was just really, really boring. What these people did back in ancient Europe was basically the human equivalent of a phone book. They went after their bosses at different parties and had to remember everything they did, who they met, and what they talked about. Equally as boring was the job of Punkawallah. You could probably say that these people were just human fans. Back in the day when ceiling fans or air conditioning weren't invented yet, the Punkawallah spent the whole day standing in one spot, operating the fan. If you look at DIY videos these days, you'll surely think, gee, making soap is so easy and relaxing. I mean, it's clean, right? And it smells so nice. Well, it wasn't always like that. In the past, being a soap maker was practically the same as working as an industrial chemist. Soap, back then, was made with such ingredients as lye, ash, and rendered animal fats. All this was blended together until the ingredients became solid. As you can imagine, such soap surely didn't smell like lavender or chamomile. Not to mention that those harsh chemicals could potentially have negative effects on the soap maker. If you've ever wondered where the term nitpicking comes from, well, it was once an actual job. Wigs were really popular at a certain point in history, but the problem with lice was quite common too. What did nitpickers do? I guess you've figured it out by now. They use lavender oil and combs to rid wigs of those pesky critters. I'm not a big fan of the treadmill, but back in Victorian England, there were people that literally had to use this device all day long. They were called treadmillers. They hopped on treadmills and used their leg power to grind corn for hours without a single break. Oakum Pickers also had one of the most boring and tedious jobs to have ever existed. They had to unravel entire ropes in search of a specific type of fiber. Oakum was a fiber that was in high demand at sea because of the way it protected the wood from water. The main problem was that you could only get it from one of two sources: the plant itself or from old ropes that contained this specific fiber. That's why some sailors on board were tasked with unraveling miles and miles of this rough and thick rope, using only their hands in search of oakum fiber. I've always wondered how people managed to wake up early in the morning back when there were no alarm clocks or cell phones to rely on. But it turns out that in the 19th century in Britain and Ireland, people came up with a pretty creative solution: the knocker-upper. It was basically the human equivalent of an alarm clock. Initially, they just knocked on the doors of those who hired them. But soon, they figured out it was really inefficient. Even worse, they often ended up waking up neighbors who didn't want to be awake. And those were always complaining about the noise. So, what was the solution? A long stick with a knob on the end. Since most workers often lived on the first floors, knocker-uppers just wandered around the streets using sticks to knock on the needed windows. But then, there's another question. Who woke up the knocker-upper? It turns out to get this position, one needed to be a specific type of person. They could sleep during the day and had no problem becoming a night owl. In any case, soon after alarm clocks became more and more popular, most knocker-uppers lost their jobs. This profession still exists today, but this doesn't make it any less dangerous. The infamous snake milker. The job title is quite self-explanatory, but still, the snake milker is a person who extracts snake venom. You might be wondering why we would ever need to do that, but it turns out that this substance is very important for people working in the medical field. Whenever someone is bitten by a venomous snake, they need to get proper treatment as fast as possible. And it's impossible to do if snake venom doesn't get studied in advance. The substance harvested from snakes is then freeze-dried and used by special laboratories and universities for research and production of antivenom. People living in ancient Rome had some of the most bizarre jobs you've ever heard of. Let's start with the saluta garrula. It was the human version of a DM, or a holiday card, or both. These people spent their working days delivering complimentary messages from their bosses to their friends or acquaintances. Then there was an ornatrix, who was basically the equivalent of a hairdresser today. The problem was that at those times, hairdressers had to perform hair treatments with such ingredients as leeches or even pigeon droppings. To top off the list of quirky Roman jobs, there was also a polisher. Ancient Romans were extremely interested in their body image. That's why they required the services of the polisher, who took pumice or any sort of abrasive materials and made sure their clients' bodies were nice and exfoliated. Court jesters weren't the luckiest people out there either. They were kinda on-call stand-up comedians for high-ranking people. They were most popular during the medieval period. Their job wasn't just telling jokes though. Depending on their talents, they also had to come up with some witty banter. perform drama pieces, recite poetry, and tell stories, sing songs, or even perform acrobatics. And still, at that time, people thought that the position of a court jester was something to look up to, since it meant a person would be spending much time with people in power. But was that actually the case? Not really. Court jesters needed to spend a lot of their time improving and expanding their skills to keep their jobs. Otherwise, people would get bored of them. Not to mention that most of the time, they had to perform on command, with no preparation allowed beforehand. Talk about masters of spontaneity. Back in ancient Greece, there were people called Gymnasiarchs. Firstly, in order to qualify for this job, these people needed to be males, from 30 to 60 years old. They also had to have a lot of money in their piggy bank. It doesn't make any sense. It will soon enough. Just let me explain. The Gymnasiarchs were hired for 1 year only, and their main task was to make athletes look good, train them, and make sure they took part in competitions. They were basically today's equivalent of a personal trainer. There was a downside though. These specialists didn't get any payment for the services they performed, and often had to cover all their expenses by themselves. Hence the need for a considerable amount of money in their savings account. On the bright side, they were highly respected people in their communities, and a lot of people looked up to them because of their discipline and the results they showed.
Technology keeps evolving at a staggering pace. Every day we're getting closer to living in a world that resembles the old yet visionary animated sitcom The Jetsons. We still don't have flying cars, but the show got many things right, from robot vacuums to 3D printers. The Jetsons also touched on the subject of AI's role in our everyday life. For example, in one episode, one of the main characters loses his job to a robot. With the rise of artificial intelligence, this is a highly likely scenario, right? Yet again, you might be relieved to hear that certain jobs will most likely always be safe from it. So let's take a look at what these professions are. But just a heads up before we begin, you might want to change your occupation by the end. The first profession on our list is social services. Throughout their careers, social service workers handle various complicated situations, such as supporting children or families with domestic conflicts. To handle such sensitive matters, they need to consider a lot of things, like relationships in the family and cultural backgrounds. They also have to come up with customized plans to address individual needs. This requires critical thinking as well as adaptability. While AI can help them gather information and make decisions, its algorithm can never fully understand that the issues at hand aren't fully black and white. In addition, social service workers have to face ethical dilemmas and make moral judgments. However, because AI is programmed on predetermined rules, it cannot replicate the complex decision-making abilities of a person. Lastly, people working with social workers often prefer someone comforting and empathetic in nature, and no chatbot can provide the emotional connections a human being can. So, similar to social services, psychology is another field that is not likely to be replaced by AI. Human emotions are complex, personal, and situation-based. Take happiness, for example. One person might be so happy and excited to hop on a plane and travel, while another might feel terrified of the journey ahead. So there's no right or wrong when it comes to what to feel or when to feel it. Yet, despite these subjective factors at hand, psychologists help each and every person that requires their help to gain insight into their thoughts and behaviors. They play a key role in facilitating personal growth and healing amongst people. AI can provide data-driven insight on the issues a client might be facing, but it cannot match the deep understanding of human emotions, thoughts, and actions that psychologists bring to their practice. On top of that, psychologists need to provide a safe and non-judgmental environment for their clients to establish trust. This will allow the clients to share their thoughts, feelings, and experiences more comfortably. However, an AI system won't be able to truly replicate the same level of empathetic, compassionate, and sincere atmosphere. Who would want ChatGPT to know their deepest fears? Not me. All the things I've mentioned so far are applicable to healthcare and physical therapy as well. The healthcare industry already uses some AI-powered tools to diagnose and prescribe remedies. However, these technologies are not advanced enough to replace healthcare workers entirely. There are several reasons for that. First of all, healthcare workers require a high level of interpersonal skills to approach patients in the right way. AI will fail to address their concerns and provide the emotional support they might need. Secondly, human bodies are complex. You think? Any diagnosis needs to take a range of factors into consideration, such as medical history or patient behavior. This requires a certain level of intuition and experience on the health worker's part, which is difficult to replicate with AI. They say teaching is a noble profession for a reason. Nowadays, many people turn to the internet to gain information or take online classes to learn new skills. But that doesn't indicate that teachers will be replaced by AI, because teaching is not simply delivering the necessary information to students. Each student might have different learning styles. For example, one might learn best with visual examples, while another might grasp information better by doing hands-on experiments. This requires teachers to be able to understand their students' needs and adjust their teaching methods accordingly. But that's not it. How many times did you fall and hurt your knee while running around the schoolyard? It was your teacher who wiped your tears and helped you, right? And how many times have you thought you didn't have what it takes to jump from the tall hurdle in physical education class? You probably didn't believe in yourself, but your teacher did. So, teachers provide emotional support, encouragement, and inspiration. They also create a safe and supportive learning environment. No AI can provide that, at least so far. Come on now, admit it. You have at least one favorite court drama show. Man, those are popular for a reason. It feels so satisfying to watch fancy lawyers in sharp suits find loopholes in the system, yell "objection," and bring justice. So, although AI has already been used for a few legal tasks, you might be relieved to hear that lawyers are not going to be replaced by it anytime soon. One of the most important reasons they won't lose their court seats to a robot is because legal professions require a high level of critical thinking as well as creativity. Lawyers analyze complex legal issues and provide their advice based on a range of factors, which include moral considerations and legal precedents. And during court, only lawyers can come up with persuasive and detailed arguments, as they can understand and deal with human problems better. AI cannot replace such nuanced thinking and decision-making skills. Artists, musicians, and all kinds of creative jobs require originality, imagination, and the ability to think outside the box. Creative professionals need to possess a deep understanding of human emotions as well as culture. They must also not be afraid to dive deep into their thoughts. That is the only way a musician can create meaningful works that will be streamed by millions, or a filmmaker will shoot a movie that will evoke powerful emotions. On the other hand, AI operates on existing data and patterns. That's why the imaginative aspect of creative work would be difficult for it to replicate. AI systems also lack the ability to experience emotions and appreciate aesthetics and art in the way a human can. So it can't produce something meaningful and relevant. Yet again, it can undoubtedly help creative professionals with certain tasks, such as generating ideas or analyzing data. Well, this one's kind of obvious if you ask me. AI models didn't suddenly appear out of nowhere. They are the result of many naturally intelligent, get it, software engineers' work. Or in other words, AI models have parents too. There's no guarantee that any AI program will run seamlessly. One wouldn't be wrong to assume that there might be issues. Software engineers make sure that such bugs are fixed and the software is updated according to the needs. So these parents are needed to run the AI models. Guess no occupation gets any more AI-proof than that. You might have heard about the one major issue surrounding AI programs. It is that they are often biased in one way or another and can report incorrect information. But any type of biased comment or action can be disastrous within a company. Human resources employees, on the other hand, need to ensure workplace processes are functioning effectively in order to prevent prejudice and discrimination. But that's not it. HR employees also mediate conflicts and handle workplace complaints. AI models won't be able to handle the complexity of these issues. That's why HR employees will always be needed. Now, last but not least, we have, applause please, actors, but specifically theater actors. Hear me out. The theater experience is an interactive one. Once the red curtains open, there's an immediate connection between the actors and the audience. Theater actors evoke powerful emotions in real time, and they adapt to the audience's reactions, as well as bring a personal touch to the characters they embody through their gestures, movements, and vocal techniques. Technology will certainly enhance certain aspects of the theater experience, but AI can never spark such a deep level of emotional connection and replicate creative decision-making. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.